Joining us now is Rina Shah, a board member of the Renewed Democracy Initiative and a senior advisor to Republican Women for Progress, and my friend Susan Del Percio, a Republican political strategist and MSNBC political analyst. So, Rina, I want to go to you first. What is your reaction to Boris Johnson announcing he's stepping down amid pressure and mass resignations within his own conservative party? And how do you think that compared to what we've seen with Trump and the Republican Party?
Well, look, like the vast majority of our viewers, I've honed my expertise in the ongoings of the British during the peak of the pandemic by watching The Crown. So, look, I'm just joking, of course. I'm joking. It's an interesting tale on that side of the pond. It really is. And it's not too different than Trump in Boris Johnson not wanting to give up power. I watched for many weeks and months, like a lot of people who were fascinated, again, in America by how they do things in British Parliament, watching him be yelled at and refusing to resign. These garden parties are what did him in. And the very thing that made him close to Trump was his sort of gripping to power at every sort of turn. It seemed like he just was not going to do the right thing. So whatever you think of Boris Johnson, he did the right thing today. He resigned in a classy manner, and he's shown he's not like Trump. So the GOP can learn a thing or two, right? But the way the British system is set up, Shermichael, this is the really important note here, is that they are about their allegiance to party. Political parties are big there, not a person. And that is what our GOP is dealing with, is the love and the cult of personality it's become around Donald Trump.
No, Rina, I think you're absolutely right. But, there's that old aphorism, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And sometimes, Susan, it is hard to give up. But, Susan, what do you think about the fact that UK politicians are pointing to the turmoil in our own country to say, we don't want this to happen here?
It's just that maybe they're paying attention and learning something. I mean, I go back to when Donald Trump first came into office, and frankly, I blame Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan for not standing up to him as two legislative leaders initially. Just think about it. If they wouldn't have let their own fear of not understanding the Trump voter and perhaps their also big concern about chaos under Trump, and they acted like any other time, they would have had their own legislative agenda, punched Trump figuratively in the nose, and they probably could have started working back. The problem is with Donald Trump is no one, like he says, he always returns a punch, but no one really threw it towards him. No one gave him from internally a problem, probably because they couldn't even understand how he got there in the first place. What we've seen across the pond is that people were willing to stand up. And I'm willing to bet that they didn't all come to this conclusion individually, that there were groups of people. I think they hit something like 50 resignations, that they did it in groups, and it made a difference. And it became clear that the prime minister could not hold together a government, which is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, and Rina, conversely, when you think about Donald Trump, he continues to have a significant hold over the Republican base here, while all the scandals that are causing Johnson to lose support ultimately led to him resigning. Something that I've thought about, Rina, you and I have talked about this over the years. Why do you think, despite everything we know now, everything that people knew who were so directly involved, that none of those political leaders said, this is a bridge too far. We have to say something about this. We have to tell the American people we have to do something.
I certainly don't mean to sound reductive in my analysis here, Shermichael, but it's almost as if it's because there's nobody else. And I know that sounds rather bizarre for a moment, but think about it. Until sort of Ron DeSantis's fancy kind of came about only in recent months, it didn't feel as if there was anybody that could out-Trump Trump. And so in a way, they don't struggle with that problem over there on that side of the pond. I think it's kind of unique. You've got Liz Truss, for example, and I've written about her. She's become a darling of conservatives over there. And I'm talking grassroots, because we know that's what's important also with the GOP base, is that love for the Trump brand, right? That brand that sort of spoke right to them, even though he was doing something else all the time that was sort of antithetical to what their needs were. But you look at Liz Truss, the foreign secretary, and how beloved she is over there. She's sort of like the top pick if you're thinking of who's going to replace Boris Johnson. And then you've got a couple others. But actually, no, the list is longer than a couple others. I've got a couple others I like, and I'd love to mention them. One of them is a guy named Rishi Sunak, by the way, who studied at Stanford and loves a free enterprise like we do, Shermichael. So there's some interesting folks like that in the mix. But again, you look at sort of their situation, and it's because they had people in waiting that I think Susan makes a great point about. They could come together and sort of build these mini coalitions to say, Bojo, you got to go, buddy.
Yeah. And Susan, when you think about that, what do you think the Republican Party can learn from the Conservative Party in Britain? Because they are completely handling this very different than the way things were handled and are still being handled by the GOP in the U.S.
I don't think they need to learn anything. I don't think they already know what the right thing to do is, and they consciously choose not to do the right thing. It's not about learning. It's about doing. And they know it, and they still refuse to do the right thing.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And Rina, when I think about this, oftentimes there are a lot of articles that have come out on the role that right-wing media has played in our landscape here in the U.S. They push narratives that we frankly know aren't necessarily true about 2020, the election, and also about January 6th. What role do you think, and how pervasive do you think that is in Republican circles in tying Republican voters to Donald Trump and allowing Trump to maintain this tight grip that he has?
I don't think we would have had a President Trump if it weren't for the right-wing media and their ability to do his bidding from day zero. I mean, there was no surprise to me that they embraced him for not who he was as a person, right? It was about this conservative populism that they knew they could just sort of slap on and say, this is our guy. So even though he never voted with them, even though he didn't share ideologically, that would an ideology, that would translate to policymaking, Rush Limbaugh, for example, saw it coming, and he said, this guy can do our work for us. It's how we choose to accept him, and they chose to accept him fast. And frankly, I saw that happen with Boris Johnson in the media in the UK as well. They sort of just propped him up, and they shoot away all the other ugly stuff. So there's not that many differences here if we're looking at it. I do think our media plays a role, but it's up to each one of us individually to sort of critically look at the candidate. And I think we failed as a Republican Party over the years to do that with the people we were propping up. That's why Donald Trump could come right on in so quickly and just win out and have his head above the pack in 2016.
No, Rina, I think you're right. I want to thank you and Susan both. And hopefully there's something we can learn from this moving forward.